Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Basu and Godin Notebook, February 12th. Arpin, how was your Super Bowl?
Super Bowl, a little disappointing. I mean, it kind of, anyhow. I'm a little sad. It's not even, everyone losing them. I kind of like the Taylor Swift aspect of it. I enjoy that. It's Patrick Mahomes that I don't know why. That guy bothers me, and I don't like. And I knew, when the Niners left that much time on the clock at the end of regulation, I thought the Chiefs were going to win in regulation, but I knew that Mahomes was not going to let the game end with a Chiefs loss at that point. And so, sure enough, they left him too much time. All they knew was one more first down. The Niners would have won the game. But good for you, Patrick Mahomes.
Good.
He's everyone's kind of starting to compare him to Brady, and he's becoming that to me in the sense that I found Brady incredibly annoying because of how good he was, and now I'm finding Patrick Mahomes incredibly annoying because of how good he is. But
but
happy for you, Chiefs fans.
They're both part of the Montreal Expos brethren
universe
legacy in their own way.
Right? Yeah, they are. That's true.
All right. Good. Super Bowl weekend means afternoon games for the Montreal Canadiens. We saw one very, very deflating loss, one that was a bit more disputed the day before, but all in all, it was a tough weekend for the Canadiens. But let's start with Jake Allen. Gave up 7 goals against his former team, the St. Louis Blues. You wrote in your notebook that he should have stopped 4, if not 5 of those goals. And I agree with you. I think it was his worst performance of the season.
It might have been his worst in a Canadiens uniform, really.
But there's been a couple last year too that were not exactly great. Mm-hmm. But I think that we're reaching a point where it's a bit chicken or the egg, where he's not playing well, but he has not played a lot. Not only there's 3 goalies, but now you can tell that they're turning to Sam Montembeault more than they did in the first half of the season. So basically, the backup job is Allen's, but technically it's split between Allen and Primo. So the fact that he's not playing a ton is certainly not helping his performance. But I can't help but look at, for all the discussion that there's been throughout the season about, the Canadiens trying to move him or looking to maximize the market on him. It's not just one game, but I think that the point that we've reached with Jake Allen now, there must not be much of a market for him anymore. And I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it's true that there was that Kent Hughes really had his idea set on a certain price or a certain return for his services. But if there was, he's going to have a hard time getting it now.
I'm not so sure about that. I think there's a certain price that Kent Hughes wants if he's asked to retain salary on Jake Allen, which at this point seems like the only way Jake Allen would get traded. I think if there's no salary retention, that the price on Jake Allen would be pretty minimal, honestly. Like it's not as if, listen, I mean, look, it's how many goalies have been traded this year? None.
And
there's been a need all year. I think teams look at probably Tampa's situation at the beginning of the season. We've talked about this already, but it bears mentioning that when teams look at their goaltending, you see how Tampa handled the loss of Vasilevsky. They held firm, stood pat, waited it out, got adequate goaltending over that period. Not the reason why they find themselves where they are it wasn't the fact of it wasn't their goaltending over the first couple of months of the season. You look at what Edmonton was in a crisis situation. The goaltending was a disaster. They didn't address it externally. They righted the ship. Stuart Skinner is one of the best goalies in the league right now. So it's, Toronto with the Samsonov thing. They didn't do anything external. They were in a crisis. They're Samsonov even is playing okay now, and so it's
Kochetkov in Carolina is another situation where
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's hard to have any leverage when you have a potential goaltending solution available. And right now, like I don't think that one game is going to really impact Jake Allen's trade value. I think most teams know what he is. I mean, the thing about that game is that Jake Allen, the value of Jake Allen is that he's going to make the saves that he's supposed to make. You know, he's not going to win you games necessarily, but he's not going to lose you games either.
Mm-hmm.
That's his intrinsic value. That game, obviously, it wouldn't be fair to say he lost it. Well, you know what? I think it would be fair to say he lost it. I mean, he needed to make, they only scored 2 goals. So it's not as if the Canadians would have won had Jake Allen been better, but he didn't make the saves he was supposed to make. You know, there's the Parayko goal, the Walker goal. There's a couple. After the game, when I asked Martin St. Louis about their net front coverage, and I referenced a goal in that game. It wound up being the Jordan Kyrou goal on the power play. But when he asked me live, I couldn't think of one. And in the back of my mind, I was gonna say, well, Marty, there's so many, I kind of lost track, and I decided not to.
You almost said that.
I almost did. I suggested it because in the heat of the moment, there's 7 goals. I'm trying to go through them. Like, which one was it again?
Yeah.
So, but I think that's you look at the Kyrou goal was on the power play, to be fair, but still, unchecked in front of the net, and you noticed at one point during the game where they had 3 power play players below the 4 penalty killers. With good adjustment against the Diamond, and but then the 2 Tyler Seguin goals on Saturday were also cases of him being left by himself in a scoring position to finish a goal. So all that being said, Jake Allen didn't stop the shots he's supposed to stop. He still has a positive goal saved above expected number, barely now, because I think it went down by about 3 in that game. When your season total is +4 something and you drop 3 in one game, it means you had a pretty bad game.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as the trade market is concerned, like I think this is sort of a narrative that's been built about Kent Hughes sticking to a price on him. And the detail to it, the nuance to it is that I think he'd probably be sticking to a price on retention.
Right.
Not necessarily on Allen himself. So if a team out there wanted Jake Allen for no retention, I would imagine like a 6th round pick would probably get it done. I don't think it would take a whole lot for them to move him with no retention, because it would just free up a lot of things.
Yeah, there's but you got to wonder though if he's, and we touched on that topic last week, but when we discussed David Savard, but is Allen the best guy now to retain money on? Because even if you retain money on his salary for next year, what sort of return are you going to get? Because yes, it's only one game, but ever since he got chased out of the game against Tampa in November,
mm-hmm.
he hasn't looked right. And there's been very few games where he would usually he starts off slowly. He gives up an early goal, puts his team in a bad position, and then as the game progresses, he gets better and better. And by the 3rd period, now he's making the saves that he can to keep his team in the game. That's been we've seen that often, but he puts them in a bad spot to begin with. And yesterday, 2 goals in the first 6 minutes. But then he did not right in the ship. He didn't look any better until the end. So I'm just, I dug some stats, and because he's not the only the only goalie on the market either. The demand for goalies is going down, but the offer remains the same. And the offer is Marc-André Fleury. It's Elvis Merzlikins. It's Kaapo Kakko. It could be John Gibson. It could be Jacob Markstrom. There's a lot of goalies out there. So, and right now,
they're all expensive with the exception of Kakkonen.
That's right. Well,
Fleury, they're all a big ticket.
Yeah, but Fleury's a UFA, so it's not too bad.
Yeah. But Fleury's numbers are worse than Allen's.
I'm sorry?
Fleury's numbers are significantly worse than even Allen's. I mean, as far as expected goal numbers, yeah, I think it's.
Yeah.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think his.
Well, since December, I'll just go. It might be an old-fashioned stat, but I'll look at save percentage since December 1st. Fleury is 915, and Allen's 886. So I doubt that the expected goals would cover that gap in the other way.
For the season, Fleury's a minus 3.01 goal save
because he was terrible
expected
to start the season.
Right,
he had a very, very bad start to the year. But when Gustafsson was bad at some point, Fleury picked it up, and he's been playing very good hockey for a while now. Whereas Allen, it's again
the trick. I mean, the tricky thing with Allen is his 17 no trade clause, but Fleury has a full no move, and so basically he would have to go to a situation that he agreed to, which softens the market for him as well. I mean, there's probably only going to be a handful of teams that he would agree to a trade with. So yeah, it's really all those goalies that you meant. Most of those goalies, Markstrom, Gibson, Merzlikins. You know, this is taking on a big contract and would require a more traditional kind of trade involving several pieces and a lot of money changing hands. And yes, Allen has that second year, and that might scare people off because, you know, I mean, you're right. If you're looking recently, the save percentage numbers that you quoted, I mean, you look at since December 30th, that was his that was his sixth start since December 30th, and he's given up at least 3 goals in all 6 of them. And in one of them he gave up 5, and obviously in Sunday he gave up 7. So, and really all season, Allen has started 4 games where he's given up less than 3 goals out of all his starts. So yeah, I mean, it's. I don't think anyone's pretending that Jake Allen is your turnkey solution to your goaltending problem, but what he's supposed to be, and what Ken Hughes could potentially sell him as, is, you know, he won't solve all your problems, but he won't be a problem. He'll go out there and he'll play, and he can't have any more games like the one he had on Sunday if they have any hopes of trading him. And obviously Allen doesn't want to be traded, so maybe he should keep playing like that, because that would prevent it for sure.
Yeah, but he's got at the minimum, he has to show that he's better than the in-house alternatives, the in-house options for those teams that are in need of goalies. You know, we talked a lot about New Jersey earlier in the year. Even Vitek Vanecek right now is playing better than Allen. You know, there's one place where he could be traded without retention, and the Canadiens could potentially get something out of it, like an asset, and it's Philadelphia. Because Philly, I mean, Carter Hart, I don't think that he's coming back in net for
he's not going to be
next
back
little while. Right.
No,
so now the backup is Cal Peterson, who's making $5 million a year, and he's got 1 more year to his contract. The Canadiens and the Flyers, even though I think that they're both sellers and buyers, because you would think that they're sellers, but because of their position in the standings, they could try to make a run at it and you know, stay afloat, because right now, as of today, they're still very much in the playoff picture. So you could trade Peterson for Allen. It would improve the Flyers. And the Canadiens, if they're willing to overpay for a backup goalie, an experienced backup goalie in Laval, you could probably get an asset for that. And then, the only victim in all that is Casimir Kaskisro in Laval, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, you could probably get a pretty decent asset, actually, if you took that Peterson contract off the Flyers' hands. That's a good point. Yeah. And but I think the second year on that deal, much like the second year on Allen's deal right now. There was a time when that second year on Allen's deal was seen as perhaps a good thing, like a reasonable price for a serviceable goaltender. Um, Maybe not so much anymore, but the second year on that Peterson deal would be a commitment from the Canadiens um, that they might not be willing to make. Listen, I don't think money's an object in Montreal. I think it is in Laval. I think the Canadiens have a pretty hard budget on what they spend on their team in Laval.
Yeah.
And they're not willing to. I mean, I don't think they would see this as that. I think they would see this as spending money to acquire a draft pick, which they've done. They're doing it with Jeff Petrie as we speak. And in that sense, they would probably say yes, because that's spending on Montreal, and this would just be kind of a residual effect. But I was pretty stunned when I kind of learned that Alex Belzil priced himself out of Laval.
Yeah.
That was a money issue.
Yeah.
And he got himself a good deal. He got a second year. That deal is one way with the Rangers. He got, I think he has a $500,000 max, if I'm not mistaken, this year, or minimum rather, something like that. It's a really high AHL salary.
Yeah.
So Canes basically got outbid on Alex Belzil. So there is not limitless resources in Laval. But yeah, I think that scenario is something that the Canes would probably entertain. That's pretty good. And we shouldn't forget, Allen from the start of the season has been really kind of leery about this three goalie situation. Like he mentioned it nonstop without even being asked about it.
Yes.
You could see it was bothering him, and it was not normal for him, and it kind of messed with his routine. The other guy in that situation, Kaiden Primo, you go back to the start of the year. I look, when he got his second start of the season was on November 9th in Detroit. So that's one game played. And his first start came against what everyone believed to be kind of a powerhouse emerging horse in the Eastern Conference, New Jersey, on October 24th, on the back end of a back-to-back, where Allen got to start in Buffalo. Primo didn't even go to Buffalo, stayed home.
Yeah.
Played against New Jersey, first start of the year, and had a number of kind of just curious decisions. Like he got Vegas, starting against Florida. Like he got some tough assignments.
Yeah.
In Carolina, coming out of Christmas. So I was talking to him after practice on Thursday, just kind of a quick chat, and I remember having a similar chat with him at the beginning of the season, asking how things are going. And if Allen wasn't happy with the three goalie situation, I mean, Primo's doesn't have quite the same stature where he can really voice his displeasure, because ultimately he's in the NHL, he's making an NHL paycheck, and what's not to like about that? But it's tough not playing. Like, he doesn't love the situation he's in right now, And so, but the one thing that he did say that I shouldn't say I was surprised, but it was interesting to hear was, I kind of said, well, it'd be nice if the waiver rules were different and they could send you to Laval and you could play there. And he immediately was like, I don't have anything else to prove in Laval.
Yeah.
I think I'm better off doing this, getting NHL practice reps against NHL shooters and NHL players and getting NHL coaching than anything I could do by playing a ton of games in Laval. So that's
it's fair, because he's shown that he's NHL caliber this year. And that's pretty amazing, considering how scattered his starts have been, that despite a very, very limited ice time, he showed that he's managed to take a step forward and reach NHL level quality goaltending. And so, because honestly, the odds were stacked against him when you would tell me, well, he would have just a handful of games throughout the season and he'd be only practicing and whatnot, with so little action. What were the chances that when he'd be put in net, he would make that leap forward the way that he did? And yet it worked. So the Canadiens' situation in goal could be much worse following that decision of 3-goalie system, had it not been for the fact that he himself improved a great deal. And that's kudos to Éric Raymond. I think that he's done a great job in helping him improve. So because he's got that success in limited action, but because he's not that uncertain goalie anymore every time that he's facing NHL shots, I understand that he says, well, I don't have anything to prove in Laval, because he's up to the level now.
Yeah, well, he has, I mentioned earlier that Allen has only had 4 starts where he allowed fewer than 3 goals. Primo's had 5. 5 starts of 2 or fewer goals. Well, actually, he allowed 2 in all 5 of them. So, I mean,
that's very good. And today's
it's not a very sophisticated metric. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's not a very advanced metric, but just from a basic quality start perspective, he has more than Allen this year. So I don't know how much the Heat's gonna. I don't know what ability the Canadiens have of trading Jake Allen. I do think he will be traded based on a body of work that's far larger than just this season. There's got to be a lot of teams out there that look at, sort of the quality chances he faces, and tell them and convince themselves, well, under our system or behind our defense or behind our team, he'll probably face a more reasonable workload, and in that scenario, will probably perform better. But it's far from a given the Canadiens are going to be able to trade him. And frankly, if they don't, I think they're fine with it. It really doesn't. It's something that can be done at the draft. It's something that can be done in the offseason, even after the draft. I think they will want to move him at some point. They might even want to move Primo. Like, honestly, I don't think that's off the table either. But it's not. I don't think there's an urgency to it that it has to be, especially having gone this long. At this point, I don't think the Canadiens view it as the end of the world if this were to continue till the end of the season. It's not ideal. It's not what they want. But if they have to wait till the draft, I think they'd be willing to do that too.
Yeah. Well, had Jacob Dobesch been stellar in Laval this year, I could have seen them say, we could keep Allen till the remainder of his contract, and in 2 years from now, we'd have Dobesch ready to be a backup in the NHL. I'm not. He's still so raw. He's still.
He is. I mean, he had a good
aggressive
stretch there. Yeah, I mean, he had a good stretch when the Rocket went on that streak. Where they started winning a lot of games. He was playing well. And I think it was to be expected with him that it was going to take him some time to adapt to the pro game, and so he's. I think that is still in progress as far as his adaptation, but I mean, he's shown some progress at least. So, maybe by the end of next season, he will be ready to be the backup. It's possible.
Yeah.
I just decided I don't know anything about the future of goaltenders. Like I don't know. I keep saying this, but I keep looking at Charlie Lindgren and saying, okay, here's proof I don't know a thing about goalies and cannot project into the future at all based on what I see right now. And so I thank Charlie Lindgren for teaching me that lesson, because now I know nothing I see with my eyes has any bearing on how a goaltender will perform in the future.
Even Montembeault, it's the way that he plays now is light years from the guy that we saw in his first few starts with the Canadiens.
I did not see this coming from him either.
Yeah,
definitely not, for sure. So I'll leave the goalie prognostication to people who know what they're talking about. And but I think there's promise in Kaiden Primo where previously there wasn't a whole lot. I think he's built some potential to be kind of a solid NHL goalie.
Okay, if we move on, apart from Jake Allen, another big story from this weekend was you like to say Team Tank. Team Tank had a big weekend, and after seeing Raphaël Harvey-Pinard go down with an injury on Saturday, and then Jordan Harris, most likely with a concussion, leaving the game on Sunday, And then Kaiden Guhle towards the end of the game, well, actually at the very end of the game, getting hurt either to his ribs or to his left shoulder. It's unclear.
He seemed to be grabbing his ribs. So looking at it more, he did seem to be grabbing his ribs on the left side, which is odd. It's an odd place to get injured in that situation, but yeah, it's on the left side of his body.
It might have been
it's
Marco
stick,
Scandella's stick, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, he left the game too, so how many more injuries can the Canadians handle? Because right now it's they're,
I mean, they got Alex Newhook back.
Yeah.
Hooray.
Yeah. I mean, but I mean, they needed him badly, obviously, since Sean Monahan was traded. But I mean,
he had a very good weekend.
He did, yeah, he did, and honestly, and Armia has continued to play well, despite the fact he did not need Sean Monahan to continue on that streak of good hockey, which is very encouraging. I liked seeing Joshua Roy to complete that line. So, that line looked pretty good. But it's more on defense. It's especially Guhle. If he was to miss any time, that would put the Canadians in serious trouble, because not only is Guhle playing on the right side already and compensating for the fact that Justin Barron is in Laval right now, but it's also the responsibilities, the number of minutes that he's playing. He seems like the one guy that the Canadians, apart from Mac Matheson probably, the one guy that the Canadians cannot afford to lose on defense.
Yeah, I would agree with that, just because, the mobility, the everything, on the penalty kill, everything about him just screams future stud defenseman. Disaster. I mean, listen, if he's out for an extended period of time, who knows how long he'll be out. That would be unfortunate to have his first 2 seasons in Montreal cut off more or less at around the same point. And going back to junior, this will be, I want to say 4 straight seasons where he's kind of had like a serious injury. And so, it's concerning. It's unfortunate. It's the fact that the Blues were up by 5. I was curious if the Canadians are going to have an issue with Scandella making that hit. Not even close to being a dirty hit. Just for the record, like nowhere even approaching that stratosphere. But after seeing all the hubbub about Ridley Gregg taking a slap shot into an empty net, and how that was apparently the most insulting thing he could have possibly done, and how Morgan Riley's reaction was in some ways justified, I was wondering. I was like, because I found that weird. I was like, oh, I didn't know that was against the code. Now I do, I guess. I'm going to put it in my make a mental bookmark of that. I was like, is this against the code? Because if that's against the code, then clearly I don't know what the code is, and maybe this is against the code too. The game 7-2. Why is the defenseman forechecking in a 7-2 game with a minute and change left, and finishing his hit like that?
Right.
So apparently not against the code. Both Nick Suzuki and Mike Matheson agreed that there was nothing wrong with what Marco Scandella did. So that's good. I do have a better understanding of the code now. But then Matheson was like, well, and then we went after him, and then Kofi fought, and so we showed that we didn't like that Guhle got hurt. So maybe it was against the code. I don't know, but we'll see.
It's the code. The code is seems probably like a much larger book than I thought it was.
It's just like the Bible. It's like the Bible. It's got like
I mean, even Ridley Gregg. Just an aside. I mean, Ridley Gregg. I understand that the Leafs were offended and all that, but how is it different than a guy we started by talking about the Super Bowl? How is it different than a guy doing a touchdown and spiking the ball?
Yeah, I don't see it. I mean, but it's amazing, like the unanimity with which former players reacted like you can't do that, and Morgan Riley had to do something. Maybe not that, but had to do something.
Just not that.
Just not that. I mean, if he just gone and punched him in the face, even with a glove on, I think every player would have stood up and applauded, and been like, yes, that's the response. But to get back to sorry, that was a bit of a tangent on my part. I apologize, but so I think it's safe to assume that Guhle, at the very least, we're operating in a bit of a vacuum here on Monday, midday Monday, in terms of his injury. I think it's pretty safe to assume he's not going to play on Tuesday against the Ducks. So what do the Canadiens do here? I think it's kind of an interesting window into how they're going to view call-ups from Laval over the next, over this part of the season. Do they? Because they could bring Justin Barron back up.
Yeah,
who at this point has played a number of games in Laval, much like Arbor Jacques did. Or do they call up their AHL All-Star, Logan Mailloux, who I'm sure they want to see in the NHL at some point this season, get some reps. This would seem to be an opportunity to do that, especially if Guhle's absence is not significant and it's not very long. If they know that he's only going to miss a couple of games, maybe that provides the perfect window to call Mailloux up and give them the perfect excuse to send him back down. But I also know to some extent how the Canadiens are hoping to have Mailloux primarily play in the AHL this season. Like they really want that for his development. So I don't know. I don't know it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it.
Well, let's not forget that Martin St. Louis at the end of training camp said that he expected to see Mailloux in the NHL at some point in the season.
He said he would bet money on it.
Huh?
He said he wouldn't bet against it.
No, he said he wouldn't bet against it. That's it.
He wouldn't bet against it. Yeah, exactly. I didn't. Yeah. I don't mean. So yeah, he wouldn't necessarily bet on it, but he wouldn't bet against it. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
So, but it's an interesting debate or decision to make because those two guys, Barron and Mailloux, they would serve at the NHL level right now. They would serve pretty much the same purpose. Because if you want to replace Guhle's tough assignments defensively, neither of those guys is going to do it. But if you might have to turn more to, obviously Kovacevic, maybe even more Jacques, and say, well, we're going to put somebody else than Jacques on the second power play or somebody else than Guhle on the second power play. And both Barron and Mailloux can be your guy for that. So it's an interesting choice. I don't think that – I'm not sure if Barron has lit the world on fire in Laval, but it's a good – they were so concerned with making sure that they would manage the mental aspect of his game and his approach to the game. They must calculate also – what's going to be the impact of calling up Mailloux instead of him? But he had some things to figure out defensively and improve his positioning defensively, improve his stick work, improve his gap. All the same things that explained why he was sent back to Laval last year.
Yeah.
So Jean-François Hull says he's a much better player now. This version of Justin Barron he's a much better player now than he was a year ago, but it's still the same defensive aspects to his game that he needs to improve. So are they going to leave him there longer or because of the experience at the NHL level that he's got? It might not be ideal, but because of the number of minutes that he might have to cover in Guhle's absence, he might be a better choice than Mailloux. That would be also a decision that would you could justify.
When you remember Martin St. Louis talking about why he was sent down, he mentioned that he had lost confidence, that Barron had lost confidence, and that started to trickle into every aspect of his game.
Yeah.
So the other thing that he was sent back to Laval to do was to build up his confidence. So this is where it becomes interesting because if the Canes pick Mailloux over him, well, what does that do to his confidence? Like, if the Canes are trying to build up his confidence, now, if he totally does not deserve to be called back up, then that's another matter. But when you're specifically trying to build a player's confidence, having Mailloux sort of leapfrog him could hurt that. And so it's really something that it's a factor here in whatever decision they make. And again, I think it is going to depend somewhat on what the diagnosis is on Guhle. And if it's a longer term injury and they need more of a permanent replacement, or at least a longer term replacement, then I think you lean Barron and say, okay, well now, we can't, we're going to give you another shot. You have the NHL experience, you deserve it. Whereas again, if I think Guhle's going to miss 2 games and it's just like a temporary thing, and give Mailloux a chance to play like in New York on Thursday, which would be cool, maybe do that. And so, but and there's no doubt Logan Mailloux deserves a shot to play some NHL games this year, and that's pretty clear. And he's, you talk about Jean-François, like I think he's been pretty impressed with Mailloux's progression. And I think it was somewhat telling, or maybe a bit of a tell, that when Raphael Harvey-Pinard went down, they didn't call up, a veteran player. They called up Joshua Roy. They didn't bring Lucas Condotta back up. They didn't call up Mitchell Stevens, even though he's more of a center. They called up Joshua Roy. They called up their young, legit prospect and gave him another look. So at some point, Mailloux's got to be wondering, when am I going to get my look? And so this might be that time. But it's not as simple as saying, well, we want to take a look at Mailloux, let's call him up. I think the Barron situation has to play a part in that decision as well.
One thing to remember, though, when it comes to Guhle, last year in March, there was a game in Anaheim where he was hit in the first period by Maxime Comtois, and he left the game, and he looked like in severe pain because of his shoulder. Mm-hmm. And the optics of it screamed long-term injury. He's got a separate shoulder. He's going to have surgery and whatnot. That's how it. And he ended up playing, missing only 2 games. Yeah, I remember that. Who knows? It might be the same, similar situation.
That's what I'm saying, especially if it's the ribs, which he seemed to be clutching at the ribs. I mean, players play with cracked ribs all the time. It's just like, it's almost standard for an NHL player that, broken foot and cracked rib are 2 things that NHL players do not consider to be injuries. Those are bobos. Yeah. That's how they see it. So if that's what happened to Guhle, and looking at it, because at first blush, especially when you see him skating to the bench with his arm tucked against his body, and he's like slouching over to his left side, you assume shoulder. But I looked at it a few times last night after the game, and he did kind of clutch at his rib area with his right hand. So if it's the ribs, probably better. But listen, we don't know anything about it. We can wait for the information to come out, but that's a good point, that sometimes looks can be deceiving in terms of severity of an injury.
Okay, looking forward to looking ahead. There's a game tomorrow against the Anaheim Ducks. There's one guy who's not going to play in that game, but who's going to be...
It's Kaiden Guhle.
No. It's Trevor Zegras. But Trevor Zegras has been... I mean, I don't think that, apart from Donald Trump and for some bizarre reason, Rex Murphy, I don't think that there's been anybody that's been trending on my Twitter for random reasons, or not so random because it's hockey and I understand Canadians fans, but the name Zegras is trending constantly on my Twitter feed.
Yes. Yeah.
It's nonstop. It hasn't died down since the rumors started. What was it, like early December or something?
Well, I mean, as soon as they traded for Cutter Gauthier, they got really ramped up, and so Yeah, and we're going to get to our mailbag segment. It's Mailbag Monday, and we got a lot of great questions, but a number of them were pertaining to the Zegras deal, and so we're just going to kind of cut that. We're just going to do a little cutout section on Trevor Zegras. We had Antoine Savage-Duguay, who talked about, what the price would be on Zegras. Alex Bisson, same kind of deal. Tom Hearn, similar question. So let's get into it. What is a reasonable ask for Trevor Zegras? It's I feel he's a two-time 60-point scorer at this age. Clearly has some, let's say, he clearly has to fill out his game. No doubt about that.
He's got warts in his game. Yeah.
Yeah. And, much like Cole Caulfield did, and I think, we talked about this last week, but it's Martin St. Louis' emphasis on the other areas of Cole Caulfield's game are bearing fruit. And if he can do that with Cole Caulfield, there's little reason to believe that he couldn't do that with Trevor Zegras, especially with how close Zegras and Caulfield are. That's one part of it. But sometimes guys like that just can't be changed. I mean, one guy I think of in that vein is Jonathan Drouin, who, good for him, is having a good season in Colorado, and honestly wish him nothing but success. But in his time in Montreal, it took him a long time to realize he needed to round out his game, and by then it was almost too late. The famous video sessions with Dominique Ducharme in the offseason and this and that, like that was when he kind of dawned on him that, okay, I'm not going to get by on my skill alone. I need to do other things to ensure I have the puck on my stick. So what do you pay? What are you paying for? What is the price based on? Is it based on the player with the warts, or the player who will come out the other side when you address those warts? How do you price that player, and how do the Ducks price that player? I'm not so sure, because he's still a pretty rare commodity, but the holes in his game are well known across the league. It's not a secret. It's everyone sees them, everyone knows about them, and frankly, I think there's some teams who just wouldn't be interested. I don't know the Canadiens to be one of those teams, but setting a price on him is tricky.
Well, the thing is, for a team like the Anaheim Ducks, who's got a ton of cap space, who's rebuilding, and they're turning to their young players, and they're looking to add scoring, why would they trade Trevor Zegras? And if they do, in itself, it sends a red flag that limits his value, because it goes against the logic of their own position to be trading that sort of guy. So there must be a reason why they do so. So I think that the simple fact of putting him on the market limits his value. But and I think that any team that's interested in his services would have to play on that in order to minimize the price that you pay. But the Canadiens would have to get into this having a sincere belief that they can turn him around and make a more complete player out of him. And when you mentioned Cole Caulfield, I think that Caulfield, through his development since last year, but especially the learning curve from this year, where he's become a more complete player, the fact that it's paying off for him now, and he started to score goals again, and in the process has become a more rounded player, that's the best calling card that the Canadiens have, because he's so close to Zegras that if they were to bring Zegras on board, Caulfield could say, follow what Marty has got to say, because trust me, it's going to pay off. And Caulfield could be a very interesting advocate for the Canadiens' intentions, instead of trying to convince a reluctant player to adopt their ways, and because they would have somebody there that would have Zegras' ears. So in that sense, I think that that's something that they should look to exploit if they go after him. As for the price, go ahead.
Well, I mean, sorry, but the price, despite everything we're saying, the price is going to be high on this guy. Because listen, he's got 2 more years under contract at $5.75 million. He's still an RFA when he comes out of that contract with arbitration rights, but still, you have potentially, you're probably going to have to sign him to a pretty big deal coming out of this deal. So you got 2 years to determine whether you want to do that. And those 2 years of team control for a guy who already has 2 60-point seasons under his belt at age 22, it's going to come with a high price, I think. It's really going to be hard to get a bargain, even though it looks like, I think the Ducks are trying to move him because they want to address other holes. Like, they want to get something at a position where, they have Karlsson, they have Gauthier coming, they have Mason McTavish, they have a lot of good young forwards. I think that's Pat Verbeek can easily just tell other GMs, like, we're trading him only because we'd like to address this, whatever this is. And they also have a lot of pretty good young defensemen, even though they just traded one away in Jamie Drysdale. So my question to you is, if Pat Verbeek says this can happen if you give us your first round pick, what do you say? Well,
it depends. It depends where that first round pick is, because to me,
let's say
if
it's 8.
The Canadiens draft 6, it's probably a no. If they draft 10, then it becomes a yes.
Huh.
To me, it really, because it goes back to our discussion from our last Future Friday, and the availability of potentially the best forward that they could find.
Yeah.
There's, at 10, you end up with whatever's left among those high quality prospects, because it's a crop of 10 or 12.
Roughly 10, yeah.
Yeah. So at 6, you're still in the position to get the guy that you want.
Yeah.
Except Macklin Celebrini, but I think that there's a chance. So to me, it depends. They might see Zegras super high, and I mean, the fit is there with Montreal to a certain extent in terms of adding like potentially elite talent, a winger that you could insert into your top 6. So yeah, to me I do that deal if the Canadiens draft 10. 6, I would really think twice.
Yeah.
How about you?
They would have to. I gotta tell you, like, just on gut, Trevor Zegras does not strike me as a guy that the Canadiens would love. Just based on our brief history of trying to get to know this administration. So even if their pick lands at 10, I wonder if they would do it. Now, would I do it? I think I would. I think there are things that he can still be taught. All the issues that we talked about, they have a really good infrastructure in place in Montreal to address them, make him a more of a complete player, and everything you said about Caulfield being a sort of a selling point for that is I agree with it completely. So all that considered, and all the upside offensively that he has, and the lack of pure offensive talent on the team, I think I would do it.
Yeah.
Do I think the Canadiens? And I think I would do it even at 6. Honestly, like, it's to me between 6 and 10. It's yes, I understand it's a wide gap in terms of value there, but to me, it's a philosophical thing. Are you more interested in a prospect, or are you more interested in more of a finished product that just needs some polishing, as opposed to someone who is several years away? Trevor Zegras would slide right into it would be another 2019 draft pick for this team to acquire. Which would make what, 4? They would have 4 first-round picks from 2019,
Well, they already have Newhook,
Caulfield, and then it would be Zegras. So that would make it.
And they got Doc.
I said Doc. So Doc, Newhook, Caulfield, and then it would be Zegras. So so this would be the 4th 2019 first-rounder. I would do it and kind of bank. And we've seen the Canadians bank on their development model already numerous times. The 2 guys we just mentioned, Newhook and Doc. I mean, those trades were predicated on the fact that they believed that under their environment, with this coach, with their hockey development department, they can make a real difference in those players, and it's working. I mean, obviously Kirby Dach hasn't been able to stay healthy, but in the glimpses we've seen of him, there's been definite results in terms of improvement in his game. Newhook, as we mentioned, missed 10 weeks without missing a beat. Marty saying Sunday how impressed he's been with how well Newhook just kind of jumped onto a moving train, if you will, after 10 weeks out. I think they would probably be pretty confident that they could do the same with this guy. And if you are, then and he fits the age group of your core, I think I would do that.
But when you mentioned, would he be the type of player for this current administration? I think that the gamble with Zegras is not the defensive lapses in his game that can be fixed or that you can live with up to a certain extent. I think the bigger question would be in terms of character and saying, well, would they consider him involved enough, engaged enough, willing to get better? He seems to be like this outgoing Mr. Superstar personality. How would that type of personality fit in Montreal? Would it go to his head where he would be under the spotlight and he would get carried away and it would steer him away from the work that needs to be done in order for him to become a better player? I think of PK Subban, for example, who was that sort of larger than life personality, very charismatic and whatnot. Well, he had his own view of what sort of player he was, and that's what you saw is what you got. And he got the best of the player that he thought he was, but it's not necessarily there were limits to how the team could steer him back to where they wanted him or how they wanted him to play. So I think there could be a similar challenge with Zegras if they were to acquire him. So to me, it's more, I think the character, the level compete, stuff like that is probably weighs heavier in the balance than just the fact that, he's not very aware or interested defensively,
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak. I agree that would be important to them. I can't speak to Trevor Zegras' character. I don't know it. I don't know it to be a problem. So I can't say that. I agree that they would put a lot of importance on that for sure. But they would also. I mean, no one spends more time on the phone than Ken Hughes. It's very rare you see Ken Hughes without a phone attached to his ear. So if there's anyone who would. And Jeff Gorton, I mean, they have a vast network of people that they can talk to. One in their own dressing room, like Cole Caulfield, obviously knows him super well. But I'm sure that would definitely be something that they would need to check off before committing to any kind of trade. But I mean, just from a fit standpoint and from a need standpoint, I mean, if that's something available, and again, just before closing on this, because it's worth pointing out, Chris Johnson is the Athletics' new trade board person since coming on board. His latest one dropped just today, if I'm not mistaken, and Trevor Zegras is 33rd on the list. So,
but how's that ranking determined? Is the likeliness, or
it's the likelihood? It's the likelihood of moving by the deadline, basically, and so it's a combination of things. Is who would be the most helpful, combined with, I believe, what's the likelihood of them even moving? So, and the Ducks are, the Ducks are in a position with Zegras where they can wait to get the best possible deal. They're not desperate to trade him. I mean, that's the thing. And so they're looking for something that'll help them. And so and they might see this in a very similar way that I saw the Canadiens' first round pick. Like, maybe they don't even want the Canadiens' first round pick. Maybe they're asking for David Reinbacher. And we talked about this already, how we wouldn't trade either of Reinbacher or even Guhle in a deal for Zegras. I don't know. Do you still feel the same way? I think you had said no the last time, so I feel the same way too. So there ultimately might not be a fit, but we'll see. And the Canadiens need to beware of falling in love with their drafted prospects. I think every administration does this, where just because they picked Reinbacher at number 5, doesn't mean you shouldn't be open to things with him. He is an asset. Ken Hughes hates that word about players, but that's what they are. So
absolutely,
but we'll see.
They might want to keep the powder dry and use that pick for something else, package it with something else, and get another type of asset rather than Trevor Zegras. I don't think that Trevor Zegras is the only good player in this league that could be available. So
especially in the offseason, I think there's going to be there should be a fair amount of movement. All right, let's get to the mailbag, because we have a bunch of questions that we want to get to, and we're almost an hour into the show, so we should do that.
Okay. Well, let's start with the email. So, quick reminder: if you want to send us your questions, you can do so by email. You can write to basuandgodin@gmail.com. You can also just drop a question on our Twitter handle, our Twitter account, which is Basu and Godin, simply put. So this one comes from Scott Harmon Heath, who says, we've talked a lot about how Marty can help young guys develop, like Slavkovsky, Caulfield, etc., and separately how the Habs will possibly try to trade for an established star presence at some point. How do you think Marty's skills would translate with a bona fide star player? Would it unlock even more potential? An experiment in fixing what isn't broken? Marty's had less, which is not to say no, success with more established NHL players like the power horse, Josh Anderson. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe there's a lot we don't know about Martin St. Louis so far. I think what we've seen so far has been the vast majority has been really good. But I think, as we mentioned, I think in a recent episode, we don't know what Martin St. Louis is going to be like when expectations are to win more often than you lose. What sort of game tactician he'll be in the playoffs, for instance. The adjustments to go into it. So this is obviously, I think, Mike Matheson is a player that he wasn't a star caliber. He wasn't a star player when he arrived in Montreal, but he was a veteran player who was being put into a star role. Had a good thing going in Pittsburgh. Was a significant player over there. And so he's the closest proxy we have to the scenario that Scott kind of lays out here. And older players have taken well to Martin. I mean, you even think of, Sean Monahan, who just left, Joel Edmondson, David Savard, like the veteran guys and the young guys all take to him the same. So I would imagine that would mean that a legitimate star player arriving in Montreal, unless he's too big to be part of the team, like that would be the only reason someone I think would not get along with Martin St. Louis is if they somehow feel too big to be coached by him. And really, when you're being coached by a Hall of Fame player who won the Art Ross Trophy and the Hart Trophy, and you have to be feeling pretty big about yourself to not want to be coached by that guy. So I don't think it'll be an issue. I really don't. I'm more confident saying that than I am saying like how Marty will coach in the playoffs one day, or how he'll, those are things that are unknown that that those are bridges he still needs to cross. I think this bridge, we're already seeing it kind of like, I think Nick Suzuki is kind of a legitimate borderline star player in the NHL right now, and will grow into one. Loves being coached by him. I haven't spoken to anyone who's been anything less than over the top praise from Martin St. Louis. Like, it's one thing, like players aren't going to badmouth their coach publicly, but they're not going to go out of their way to say, to really heap praise on the guy if they don't like him. And so I don't think it'll be an issue.
No, I don't think the examples with, he mentions Josh Anderson. I don't think it's got to do with the age of the player or a veteran that's set in his ways or anything like that. But I think that Martin St. Louis will thrive and be especially good coach with the players that have a great hockey sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's true.
That's why I lean towards, if you talk about a bona fide, star player, I would assume that it comes with very good hockey sense.
Mm-hmm.
Simply put, that's what makes me think that since his teachings and his style of coaching fits the guys who operate mainly with their brain, that hints like a good connection, a good pairing between St. Louis and that sort of star-studded player. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question here. Speaking of Anderson, and we'll put also Brendan Gallagher in that same question. Actually, on Twitter, Tom Hearn is doing so. He says, as others have said, I would like to know what they do with Anderson and Gallagher. I don't know this team can be good with two right-wing spots taken up by them and the amount of cap space the two of them eat up together. We touched on Gallagher last episode, or in the previous episode, regarding the fact that we thought it was unlikely that they would buy out his contract. I think that he gets into the group of players that would say their contracts are immovable in terms of trade. But Anderson's going through a very, very tough period, a tough season, but he's still rather young. There's nothing to say that next year he would not bounce back and be attractive and interesting to another team. And also, the professional scouts on every team, a lot of what they do is look at situations of players that are underperforming on other teams, understand the environment in which they are, by whom they are coached, how they are coached, how the style of play of that team has a potential as a positive or negative impact on their performances. And also after that, after you've analyzed that, it's how said player would fit in our system, how we play, how we're coached, et cetera, et cetera. So despite the fact that Josh Anderson has had tremendous difficulties this year, a lot of bad puck luck, a lot of missed opportunities, I still think that there could be a team out there that said, he could really help us. So he's far from a lost cause, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with that. Both worth mentioning that their contracts run out at the same time. They're both signed through 26-27. So the best thing, and I agree with you that the one that is most likely to not finish that contract in Montreal would be Josh Anderson, just because of the sheer number of conversations I've had with scouts, some of whom look at him and see a guy with a lower hockey IQ who doesn't process the game very well, whereas others see him as a big body who can skate like the wind and can be very physical and can score goals, even though this season he hasn't done that. And so the idea of Josh Anderson is still kind of fresh in a lot of scouts' minds. I would imagine a lot of general managers' minds. And the best thing that he could probably do uh, to improve his value on the trade market would be for the Canadiens to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
If it's next year, then I don't think it's likely that they make the playoffs next year. In fact, I consider it highly unlikely that they make the playoffs next year. But if they did somehow make a big jump, sneak into the playoffs, and just remind general managers of what Josh Anderson looks like in the playoffs, I think that offseason you would be able to move that guy. Because playoff Josh Anderson is something. He's able to impact a series without ever even touching the puck. Like, honestly, like his forechecking ability, his just the constant strain of going back for pucks, knowing this guy's coming after you, has a real impact. And so, I mean, I guess the same could be said of Gallagher, but
the size and speed combo it remains very attractive for
it's
teams.
made for playoff hockey. It's made for playoff hockey. And so if the Canadiens can get him into some playoff games, I think they'd have a much easier time trading him than they would right now. I mean, right now his value's never been lower, obviously, because of the season he's had. But I agree with what you said, where scouts do look for, they're looking for they're looking to game the market. They're looking for that sort of the exception or that player who's undervalued based on counting stats and looking at tools and putting those tools into a certain lineup. And so, I think there's a chance that they move him. Yes, I agree, but not anytime soon. Let's go back to the Twitter machine for another one. And this one, from Charles, wrong FPS on X. Would Montreal have any interest in offering someone like Jarvis or Natchez or Lundell? Would they have more chances of acquiring someone in trade? And what is the value of Kaapo Kakko? So a lot of people say a late first is too much for him. Obviously hasn't lived up to his potential, but he already has a 40-point season under his belt at only 22. And with the info of the owner, Tom Dolan, the Rangers owner, wanting to participate in the Sphere for the draft, I think they would welcome another first rounder so they could trade one of them. What say you to that?
Okay, well, there's a lot to unpack here. Well, first, regarding the offer sheet, the guys that you mentioned there, Jarvis, Natchez, those guys their contracts are up at the end of this current season, and the you can only offer sheet a guy after the draft. So basically, the picks,
July 1st.
It's no, actually, it's after you've after the QOs the qualifying offers have been put.
It's not July 1st?
If I'm not mistaken. Well, there's a
few
days, like the first Monday after the draft or something like that. But anyway, it's pretty much, we can say July 1st, and in practicality, it doesn't change much to my point. But the Canadiens would look at using their 2025 draft picks in order to make an offer sheet. I think it's really worth looking at. I think it's an avenue where the Canadiens could be aggressive. It's ironic that you would mention the Carolina Hurricanes, but personally, I mean, Seth Jarvis is a player that I absolutely love. I know that he might have been had he been available at when the Canadiens drafted Kaiden Guhle. He's the one guy probably that Trevor Timmins would have drafted instead of Guhle, and for good reason. I think he's a very talented player. He would be a great add through the offer sheet market, but not sure if the Canadiens want to go that route, especially with a revengeful brass in Carolina.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but the Canadiens have to get creative, because if they don't find anything that enables them to acquire a high-end talent through the trade market in the next year or two, something will have to give, and they might need that. And the fact that they'll have a lot of flexibility money-wise is an opportunity for them to to try to force other teams' hands, force other teams' hands, and try their way into a market like that. Lundell, he's good. He's a good player, and Natchez is a good player. But to me, among the three that you've named, Seth Jarvis would definitely be my target.
Yeah, and the fourth guy that he named, Kaapo Kakko, is the guy that I would actually be more inclined to look at. Obviously.
Yeah, but you don't need to offer sheet Kaapo Kakko.
No, but of course not. And he's talking about trading the Jets' first round pick potentially for Kaapo Kakko, because the Canadiens' next pick is the Avalanche's second round pick, which probably won't get it done. And so I think, with the notion that I think a lot of people seem to think that this draft drops off at around 20, which is why the Jets were so quick to trade their first, why the Canucks were so quick to trade their first. I mean, it just, there is, I guess, a notion that you're drafting second round talent with those picks. If the Rangers, I think Kakko also, as we mentioned earlier with Zegras, kind of just fits a timeline, fits a grouping. He's obviously, Jeff Gorton drafted him as general manager. That goes without saying, but he's also 22 years old. He's also from the 2019 draft. It's they would then have the second and third picks from the 2019 draft, which would be pretty wild. Listen, it's are there other underlying issues? He's right. His 40-point season was last season. He had 18 goals and 22 assists. He played all 82 games. This year, obviously, has been a disaster for him. What's happening there? If all it took was the Jets' first round pick to get him, I would take that swing. And see, like, for the exact same reasons that we all mentioned, the whole Zegras conversation. This is a guy that was a consensus number 2 pick. Like, I think Jeff Gorton and Bobrovsky, they get some heat over Kakko not panning out, but I don't think there's a single team in the league that wouldn't have taken him second overall in that draft. So sometimes those picks just don't work out. It's just like, there was some talk, not a lot, but some people were even saying, he might be better than Jack Hughes. It wasn't a huge majority of people, or a majority at all, but I did definitely see that being floated. Like, he might be better than Jack Hughes. He might be worth going with the number 1 pick. So anyhow, he clearly isn't. I'm not making that argument now, but if all it cost you was a late first to take a chance on him, I would do that. And that would be, to me, more in line with the way the Canadiens have gone about trying to add significant talent, would be that way.
Yeah, but you don't want it. You don't want Gorton and Bobrovsky acquire him just to prove the point that they were right, and giving it a.
Well, no, that's not why they would be approving. It'd be getting a talent like that's.
Yeah, but it's also a talent who's been in the league for a few years now, and you want, you're still waiting for him to really blossom. But a late first round pick, it's to me, it's definitely it's worth a try.
Yeah,
for sure. And the story with James Dolan and the Sphere, it came out a few days ago. I think it was Darren Dreger who mentioned that. So the story is that the Dolan has been asking the Rangers to not trade their first round pick because he's a part owner of the Sphere in Vegas, where the draft is going to be held, and he wants to make sure that the Rangers are going to participate will be active players in the draft for that event, which sounds super silly.
Yeah, but it sounds right up James Dolan's alley, though. That sounds like a thing that James Dolan would 100% do.
Yeah, but that's two different things, though, because if you want to improve your hockey team by trading an asset for players so you get stronger and you get a better team at the trade deadline, that's one thing. But you can also, the Rangers could try to do that and say we're going to recoup that pick later, and then they could could fetch that first rounder from Montreal for Kakko. But it's on the timeline. I don't see the Canadiens getting Kakko before the trade deadline. So those are two different, in terms of timeline, is two different instances.
Yeah. That's a trade that could easily happen at the draft. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just for the record, Kaapo Kakko is 37th on Chris's trade board. So 33 is Zegras. 37 is, I just think it's hilarious that we've discussed them acquiring two players who were taken in the 2019 draft. I think it's just so funny. If they could just basically build their whole team off guys who were drafted in the 2019, that would make me very happy.
Hey, go get Peyton Krebs while you're at it.
Yeah, why not? Okay, we got time for one more, I think. You want to pick it?
Okay. Yeah, okay. So how about Amelia Pond, who's saying, do you have early picks for the Jacques Beauchamp Award?
Jacques Beauchamp Award, yeah.
She would guess Jake Evans, but
I think it'd be David Savard.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I think he's the clubhouse leader right now, even though he missed some time. Of course, if he winds up getting traded, then all bets are off. But there aren't really any other I guess Jake Evans. But I guess Jake Evans, Kovacevic, maybe. But aside from Savard, we both agree that Savard is the leader. But if, let's say, he got traded at the deadline,
yeah,
who would be in line to take that spot?
Wow,
it's tough. There's not a lot of candidates.
No. Evans fits in that category, but it's at that point, why do you give an award for a guy because he fits in that category? I'm not sure that Evans is especially deserving for that role as an unsung hero. No,
it would be by default. It would just be like, oh, you're there, and you haven't really won it. You haven't really been named 3-star, a third, in the 3 stars very often. So here,
I would put Jaden Struble. If Struble was to finish the season in Montreal,
that's not a bad
and
call.
Savard was traded, and Struble was to get even more opportunities to prove himself, and by then you would have 50 something games behind his belt. That would probably be enough to worth maybe consideration.
Absolutely. Yeah. And good on Jaden Struble for coming out to talk after the game he had on Sunday. I thought that was a real mature thing and really faced the music. Good on him. So yeah, that's a good pick. I think that's. But yeah, we both agree David Savard. This is David Savard's award to lose. And would be only injury or a trade would probably prevent him from winning it at this point.
Okay. I think we can wrap this up. Thank you for sending us your questions. There's a lot of good ones that I wish we could tackle, but it's just time is running out. But try to keep a folder of some evergreen questions that are relevant. There's some questions about the assistant coaches that are interesting, but maybe we can discuss that later. So for now, Arpin, I wish you a good rest of the day. Thanks to all of you guys to listen to us until the end. Don't forget to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts if that's where you listen to us. You can also drop a comment. It's always appreciated. And, also take a peek at what the SDPN shows have got to offer. It's a great network. There's a lot of fun shows there. So you mentioned Chris Johnson. Well, there you go. Chris Johnson. There's a lot of cross promotion going on today.
And obviously, Steve Dangle podcast, which I think is up to. They're actually going to produce more episodes, which is pretty wild. So check that out. And you can subscribe to SDPN on YouTube in order to get our show in addition to all the other shows that they produce over there. So thanks very much. We'll talk to you on Friday after the Canadiens face the Ducks and the Rangers. And yeah, we'll talk to you then. Enjoy your week.